Okay. Alright, here I come into the studio. The book review studio. Okay, I'm Sean Maurer. This is Love and Division, the book review, book review playlist. Got my red ice shirt on. Okay, today we're gonna look at Alexander Solzhenitsyn. I just talked to my computer guy. I forgot to ask him about how to reverse this image. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Warning to the West. Okay. Okay, let's see here. Basically, I mean, when I do a book review, it's usually just, I read key passages and I add commentary. These are not really like a real professional book review. All right, let's see here. I mean, I normally don't give too much of a, synopsis or anything like that. Okay, so, okay. Here we go. All right, Warning to the West. Page 14 is my first page of interest. But it was as if the capitalists had not heard, could not understand, could not believe this. Nikita Khrushchev came here and said, "We will bury you." They didn't believe that either. They took it as a joke. And that's, when he came to America. Now, of course, they have been more clever in our country. Today, they don't say, "We're going to bury you." Now they say, "Détente." Nothing has changed in communist ideology. The goals are the same as they were, but instead of the artless Khrushchev who couldn't hold his tongue, now they say détente. In order to make this clear, I will take the liberty of presenting a short historic survey of the history of these relations, which in different periods have been called trade stabilization of situation, recognition of realities, and now détente. These relations have at least 40-year history. Let us remind you with what kind of system relations began. And by the way, let me give you the date on this so that we know, okay, we know what, how, 1975, 76, okay. Okay, let me remind you what kind of system these relations began. The system was installed by an armed uprising. It dispersed the Constituent Assembly. It capitulated to Germany, the common enemy. It introduced punishment and execution without trial through Chika. It crushed workers' strikes. It plundered the countryside to such an unbelievable extent that the peasants revolted, and when this happened, it crushed the peasants in the bloodiest possible manner. It smashed the church. It reduced 20 provinces of our country to utter famine. And by the way, we're not talking about the coronavirus lockdown. But that's why I'm reading this, because it could go in that direction. It reduced 20 provinces of the country to famine. This was, in 1921, the infamous Volga famine. It was a typical communist technique to struggle for power without thinking of the fact that the productivity is collapsing, that the fields are not being sown, that the factories stand idle, that the country is sinking into poverty and famine. But when poverty and hunger do come, then to turn to the humanitarian world for help. We see this in North Vietnam today. Portugal is on the same path, and the same thing happens in Russia in 1921 when the 3-year civil war started by the communists, and civil war was a slogan of the communists. Civil war was Lenin's purpose. Read Lenin. This was his aim and his slogan. When they had ruined Russia by civil war, then they asked America, feed our hungry. And indeed, generous and magnanimous Americans did feed our hungry. The so-called American Relief Administration was set up, headed by your future President Hoover. And indeed, many millions of Russians lives were saved by this organization of yours. And this is Solzhenitsyn speaking in America in the 70s. What sort of gratitude did you receive for this? In the USSR, not only did they try to erase this whole event from popular memory, it's almost impossible in the Soviet press today to find a reference to the American Relief Administration. They even denounced it as a clever spy organization, a cunning scheme of American imperialism to set up a spy network in Russia. I continue. This was a system that introduced the first concentration camps in the history of the world. This was a system that in the 20th century was the first to introduce the use of hostages, that is to say, to seize not the person whom they were seeking, but rather a member of his family or simply someone at random, and to shoot him. Such a system of hostages and the persecution of families exists to this day. It is still the most powerful weapon of persecution because the bravest person who's not afraid for himself can flinch at the threat to his family. This was a system which was the first, long before Hitler, to employ the false announcements of registration, that is to say, such and such a person must appear to register. People would comply and then they were taken away to be killed. For technical reasons, we didn't have gas chambers in those days. We used barges. 100 or 1,000 persons were put into a barge and then it was sunk. This was a system which deceived the workers in all of its decrees: the decree on land, the decree on peace, the decree on factories, the decree on freedom of the press. This was a system which exterminated all other parties, and let me make it clear to you that it not only disbanded each party but destroyed its members. All members of every non-communist party were exterminated. This was a system which carried out genocide of the peasantry. 15 million peasants were shipped off to their deaths. This was a system which introduced serfdom in the so-called passport system. There was a system in time of peace artificially created a famine causing 6 million persons to die in the Ukraine between 32 and 33. They died on the very threshold of Europe, and Europe didn't even notice. The world didn't even notice it. 6 million people. It could continue. I could continue this enumeration, but I must stop because I have come to the year 1933, when after all the facts I have named, your President Roosevelt and your Congress decided that this system was worthy of diplomatic recognition, of friendship and assistance. And of course, as far as I'm concerned, the ultimate plan was to become that system. Okay. Let me remind you that the great Washington did not agree to recognize the French Convention because of its savagery. Let me remind you that in 1933, voices were raised in your country objecting to the recognition of Soviet Union. However, this recognition took place, and it was the beginning of friendship and ultimately of a military alliance. Let us recall that in 1904, the American press was delighted at the Japanese victories, and everyone wanted Russia's defeat because it was a conservative country. And in 1914, reproaches were directed at France and England for having entered into alliance with such a conservative country as Russia. So we know that even today, conservative countries are under attack. Hungary, for instance, is being is being slandered in the New York Times. Okay. Something that is incomprehensible to the ordinary human mind has taken place. In any case, the powerless, average Soviet people could not understand year after year and decade after decade what was happening. How were we to explain it? England, France, United States were the victors in World War II. Victorious states always dictate peace. They create the sort of situation which conforms to their philosophy, their concept of liberty, their concept of national interest. Instead of this, beginning in Yalta, your Western statesmen, for some inexplicable reason, signed one capitulation after another. Never did the West or your President Roosevelt impose any condition on the Soviet Union for obtaining aid. He gave unlimited aid and then unlimited concessions, without any necessity whatever, the occupation of Mongolia, Moldavia, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, and silently recognized in Yalta. After that, almost nothing was done to protect Eastern Europe, and 7 or 8 more countries were surrendered. Stalin demanded that the Soviet citizens who did not want to return home be handed over to him, and the Western countries handed over 1.5 million human beings. How was this done? They were taken by force. English soldiers killed Russians who did not want to become prisoners of Stalin and drove them by force to Stalin to be exterminated. This has recently come to light just a few years ago. 1.5 million human beings. How could the Western democracies have done this? Well, I can tell you, because the Western democracies were owned by communists, basically. Behind the scene, the shadow government was already pro-communist at that time. Okay. Page 37. All right. It is a system where for 40 years they have not been genuine elections, but simply a comedy, a farce. And now it sounds like he's talking about America. Thus, a system which has no legislative machinery. It is a system without an independent press, a system without an independent judiciary, where the people have no influence either on external or internal policy, where any thought which is different from the states is crushed. Well, sounds like America today. And let me tell you that electronic bugging in our country is such a simple thing that it is a matter of everyday life. You had an incident in the United States where bugging caused an uproar which lasted for 1.5 years. For us, it is an everyday matter. Almost every apartment, every institution has its bug, and it doesn't surprise us in the least. We are used to it. Okay, so here we go. Right? All this tracking. Right? All this tracking that we're doing. See, it was the intention. Roosevelt and the people that owned him, the people that owned Churchill. This is why they were all fine and dandy with communism, because that's where we were heading. And I had this discussion with a friend recently. This whole thing, Cold War and anti-communism in America, that was just to make you think that they were anti-communism. In fact, it's an old trick. Pretend like you oppose the very thing that you're accomplishing. Okay. Okay, let me see here. In a system where unmasked butchers of millions like Molotov and some lesser men have never been tried in the courts, but retire on enormous pensions in the greatest comfort. It is a system where the show still goes on today, and where every foreigner who wants to see the country is surrounded by several planted agents working according to a fixed scenario. It is a system where the Constitution has never been adhered to for one single day, where all the decisions are reached in secrecy among a small, irresponsible clique, and then flung down on us and on you like a bolt of lightning. Well, it's amazing. A warning to the West. Wow. A warning that we, all know was not heeded. Okay, let's see here. I got a good graphic for that. Maybe let me see if I can do this. Let me turn on my screen capture. Okay, and I got a really good graphic for this video that I should put in the background. Let me see if I can pull it up. Give me a couple seconds here, and I'll just put this in the background. It's perfect for this video. I just realized I should have thought of it before. Okay, let's see. Let's see. Oh, here it comes. It's taking a little bit. It's taking a little bit of energy to get this up. Okay, here we go. Okay, I got my computer, guys. I've been working on my My computer trying to get me some more working memories. Getting there. We're getting there. We're getting a lot. We're getting quicker. I got several things going at once now, so it's it's hanging in there. We haven't crashed yet. Where do you see this graphic? It's perfect if I can find it. Gee. It's going to be hard to find. Maybe I got it down here somewhere. I might have it here already. Yeah, here it is. Good. Okay, got it. All right. Let me see. I got to open this with image viewer. Let's try and see what happens. Okay. It's coming. It's bouncing around. Ah! Here it is. Okay. Let me bring it back over here a sec. Let me see. Let me okay, put it here and we'll just put it on the screen in the background. And we will continue reading our book. Let's see what I don't know how to get that off of there if that's let's cancel that for now. Okay, good. Alright, that didn't throw me up. Whoops. This thing's kind of hard. This thing's kind of glitchy. My screen capture thing is kind of glitchy. It doesn't know if I want to be here or there. And you see it. I'll try one more time. And then if I can't get it to come over here, I don't know why it was not coming over here. I don't know. Let me just drag it over here anyways and see if I can get... I can't get myself out of the picture. That's the problem. Maybe I can... Nope. Come on. Oh, there we go. I forgot. I got to hit it twice. All right, it's my bad. Okay, I don't know how to use this stuff. Okay, so here we go. Those who don't study history are doomed to repeat it. Yet those who do study history are doomed to stand by helpless where everyone else repeats it. Now I get this graphic from this meme. I don't know where it originally comes from, but I got a lot of cool memes from this guy on Library, Richard Harris, coaching, I believe it is, Liberty Livestream. He came up. He's got a really good arsenal of memes. So we'll leave that in the background and I'll continue to read. Okay, we'll go to page 44. And finally, to evaluate everything that I have said to you, we need not remain on the level of practical calculations. Why did such and such a country act in such and such a way? What were they counting on? Instead, we should rise above this to the moral level and say, in 1933 and 1934, your leaders and the whole Western world made an unprincipled deal with totalitarianism. We will have to pay for this. Someday it will come back to haunt us. For 30 years we have been paying for it, and we're going to pay for it in an even worse way in the future. Welcome to the future, folks. We are here. We've been, and it's not a place you wanted to arrive. One cannot think only on the low level of political calculations. It is also necessary to think of what is noble and what is honorable, not just what is profitable. Resourceful Western legal scholars have now introduced the term legal realism, which they can use to obscure any moral evaluation of affairs. They say, recognize realities. If certain laws have been established in countries ruled by violence, these laws still must be recognized and respected. At the present time, it is widely accepted among lawyers that law is higher than morality. Law is something which is shaped and developed, whereas morality is something inchoate and amorphous. This is not the case. The opposite is true. Morality is higher than law. Law is our human attempt to embody in rules a part of that moral sphere which is above us. We try to understand this morality, bring it down to earth, and present it in the form of law. Sometimes we are more successful, sometimes less. Sometimes we have a mere caricature of morality, but morality is always higher than law. This view must never be abandoned. We must acknowledge it with our hearts and souls. Okay. Today, there are two major trends in the world. The first is one I have just described to you, which has been going on for more than 30 years. It is a process of short-sighted concessions, a process of giving up, in the hope that perhaps at some point the wolf will have eaten enough. This is what the people do, not the country. The country is on the side of the wolf. The second trend is one which I consider the key to everything, which I predict will bring all us our future under the cast iron shell of communism. For 20 years in the Soviet Union, and for a shorter time in the communist countries, a liberation of the human spirit is occurring. New generations are growing up steadfast in their struggle with evil, unwilling to accept unprincipled compromises, preferring to have everything, salary, living conditions, life itself, so as not to sacrifice conscience, unwilling to make a deal with evil. This trend has gone so far that in the Soviet Union today, Marxism has fallen to such a low point that it has become a joke, an object of contempt. No serious person in our country today, not even university and high school students, can talk about Marxism without a smile or sneer. But this process of our liberation, which obviously will entail social transformation, is slower than the first one, the process of concessions. Over there, when we see these concessions, we cannot understand why so quickly, why so precipitously, why yield several countries in 1 year. Okay. I started saying that you are the allies of our liberation movement in communist countries. I call upon you, let us think together and try to see how we can adjust the relationship between these two trends. Whenever you help the person persecuted in the Soviet Union, you not only display magnanimity and nobility, you are not only defining them, but you yourselves as well, you are defending your own future. Okay. A little too loud here. Let me just... Okay. Okay, I see. Okay, let's see here. On our crowded planet, there are no longer any internal affairs. The communist leaders say, don't interfere in our internal affairs. Let us strangle our citizens in peace and quiet. But I tell you, interfere more and more. Interfere as much as you can. We beg you to come and interfere. Well, the American people, are not interfering enough, with our own communist takeover. That's why, I made the video, the heroes of the fake pandemic. They're the lockdown protesters. They're the heroes. They're my people. Okay, and I say that, even as a Christian, Jesus said, why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? He said, fear not. These guys, they're the ones that aren't fearing. It's that simple. Okay. May I express our deep appreciation to Alexander. Okay, this is the guy who's I think he's going to introduce the next talk, or he's just concluding. Anyways, may I express our deep appreciation to Alexander Solzhenitsyn for his inspiring address, for the thoughts that he left with us at a time when God knows the world needs to think more about human freedom. The world needs to think more about those who are losing their freedom every day. America must, in my opinion, shape up to this challenge as leader of the free world, because if America doesn't lead the free world, I'm afraid, has no leader. Well, see, America had already been taken over by the shadow government. I don't know, we're 100 years behind. We're just on our way in to the great slaughter forward. Okay. All right, let me see, page 53. See, America, America is, we're the carpet bombers for the global communists. That's our wonderful role in the world. But do we really have to wait for the moment when the knife is at our throats? Couldn't it be possible ahead of time to assess soberly worldwide menace that threatens to swallow the whole world? I was swallowed myself. I have been in the dragon's belly, in the red-hot innards. It was unable to digest me and threw me up. I have come to you as a witness to what it is like there in the dragon's belly. It is astonishing that communism has been written about itself in the most open way, in black and white, for 125 years, even more openly, more candidly in the beginning. The Communist Manifesto, for instance, which everyone knows by name and which almost no one ever takes the trouble to read. I've read it. I think I've read it. I did a book review on that, I'm pretty sure. Contains even more terrible things than what has actually been done. It is perfectly amazing. The whole world can read. Everyone is literate, yet somehow no one wants to understand. Humanity acts as if it does not understand what communism is, as if it does not want to understand. It is not capable of understanding. I think it is not only a question of the disguises that communism has assumed in the last decade. It is rather that the essence of communism is quite beyond the limits of human understanding. It is hard to believe that people could actually plan such things and carry them out. And it is precisely because its essence is beyond comprehension, perhaps, that communism is so difficult to understand. Wow. Man, this guy was just, look at that comic in the background. That's all you got to do. It's funny how bad my camera does screenshots. I guess it's because I'm not using a tripod. Let's see here. Okay, that was page 54. 61. Let's go to 61. I would particularly like to remind you today that communism develops in a straight line as a single entity without altering. As people now like to say, Lenin did indeed develop Marxism, but primarily along the lines of an ideological intolerance. If you read Lenin, you will be astonished at how much hatred there was in him for the least deviation. Whenever some view differed from his even by a hair's breadth. Lenin also developed Marxism in the direction of inhumanity. Before October Revolution in Russia, Lenin wrote a book called The Lessons of the Paris Commune. There he analyzed why the Paris Commune was defeated in 1871. His principal conclusion was that the Commune had not killed enough of its enemies. It had destroyed too few people at a time when it was necessary to kill entire classes and groups. And when he came to power, Lenin did just this. Wow. Okay. And the word Stalinism was thought up. This is a term that became very popular. Even in the West, they often say now, if only the Soviet Union doesn't return to Stalinism. But there was never any such thing as Stalinism. It was contrived by Khrushchev and his group in order to blame all the characteristics, traits, and principal defects of communism on Stalin. It was a very effective move. But in reality, Lenin had managed to give shape to all the main features before Stalin came to power. It is Lenin who deceived the peasants about their land and the workers about self-management. He is the one who turned the trade unions into organs of oppression. He's the one who created Cheka, the secret police, and the concentration camps. It is he who sent troops out to the border areas to crush any national movements for liberation and set up an empire. Okay. Okay, we'll go page 79. Okay. In addition to the grave political situation in the world today, we are also witnessing the emergence of a crisis of unknown nature, one completely new and entirely new, non-political. We are approaching a major turning point in world history, in history of civilization. It has already been noted by a specialist in various areas. I could compare it only with the turning from the Middle Ages to the modern era, a shift in our civilization. It is a juncture at which settled concepts suddenly become hazy, loose. The precise contours at which our familiar and commonly used words lose their meaning, become empty shells, and methods which have been reliable for many centuries no longer work. It's the sort of turning point where the hierarchy of values which we have venerated and which we use to determine what is important to us and what causes our hearts to beat is starting to rock and may collapse. Okay. All right. I understand, I sense that you're tired, but you have not yet really suffered the terrible trials of the 20th century, which have rained down on the old continent. You're tired, but not as tired as we are, crushed for 60 years. You're tired, but the communists who want to destroy your system are not. They're not tired at all. Okay. But a concentration of world evil is taking place, full of hatred for humanity. It is fully determined to destroy your society. Must you wait until it comes to smash through your borders, until the young men of America have to fall defending the borders of their continent? No, because it's coming from within. It's coming from within. We don't. Let's see if he gets to that. He might. He's pretty observant. I think he might. I said the last time that two processes are occurring in the world today. One is a process of spiritual liberation in the USSR, and the other in the other communist countries. Okay, I'm sorry. The one process is spiritual liberation in USSR and other communist countries. The second is the assistance being extended by the West to the communist rulers, a process of concession, of detente, of yielding whole countries. And I only said, remember, we have to pull ourselves up by our own efforts. But if you do defend us, you defend your own future. And there's a reason why, American policy is pro-communism. This is because the American shadow government is a communist shadow government. 109, I'm going to turn this up a little bit. I had kind of a loud file. I like to hear my background music a little bit as a monitor and to keep me company. Okay. All right, we'll go to 109. All right. Okay. Okay, the Soviet Union can only move along one path of flourishing of totalitarianism. It would be more appropriate if it were not you asking. At the moment, the question is not how the Soviet Union will find. Oh, we stalled out. What happened? I don't know why we stalled. Okay, here we go. I stalled out. I don't know where I stalled out. I'll read that last couple sentences. The flourishing of totalitarianism, it would be more appropriate if it were not you asking me which way Russia, or rather the Soviet Union, let us not get the two mixed up, will go, but if I were to ask you which way the West is going, because at the moment the question is not how the Soviet Union will find a way out of totalitarianism, but how the West will be able to avoid the same fate. How will the West be able to withstand the unprecedented force of totalitarianism? That is the problem. Okay. And I have a theoretical solution. And it's funny, I put it up when it got taken down from YouTube. But my theoretical solution, you can find, I moved it to library, of course. And it's called, is David Icke been trapped by the New World Order? And watch that video, that's my theoretical solution. Okay, anyways, the 119. Here, forgive me, there are several questions. Yes, it is important of technology which is saving the Soviet Union. It is the import of technology which is saving the Soviet Union, that's true. But I return to the terrible statement of Bertrand Russell, better red than dead. Why did he not say it would be better to be brown than dead? There is no difference. All my life and the life of my generation, the life of those who share my views, we all have had one viewpoint. Better to be dead than a scoundrel. In this horrible expression of Bertrand Russell's, there is an absence of all moral criteria. Looked at from a short distance, these words allow one to maneuver and to continue to enjoy life. But from a long-term point of view, it will undoubtedly destroy those people who think like that. It is a terrible thought. I thank you for quoting this as a striking example. I'm not sure what that last part of it, but it's kind of what's going on. I mean, I've heard people say, they're, as long as the government, is not asking you to do something that you can't do. I mean, where do you draw the line? That's a very subjective. Okay, let's see. 132. Okay, page 132. Okay. Okay, note, however, in 1945, when millions of Soviet citizens had to be handed over for dispatch to the Gulag archipelago, this argument was conveniently twisted. We have no right to carry out the wishes of these millions, it was said, and to ignore our obligations toward the authorities of an allied country. How easily one's egoism can be satisfied by a handy formula. But there were even nobler justifications than these. What was happening in Russia was nothing more than a continuation of all that had happened in the 18th and 19th century, Europe. A repetition of the general transition from liberalism to socialism. This tendency of ideas to continue on their natural course made people admire them, and so all the aggressive elements, all the influential elements in society, and this was especially the case in Britain, admired what they called the unprecedented progressive experiment taking place in the USSR. While we were being strangled by the cancerous tentacles of the Gulag archipelago, while millions of hardworking peasants were being sent to die in Siberia in midwinter, not very far from you live in the Ukraine and the Kuban, some 6 million peasants, including children, old men and women, died of famine, swollen with hunger and writhing in agony, and this was in peacetime. Not a single Western newspaper printed photographs or reports of the famine. Indeed, your great George Bernard Shaw even denied its existence. Famine in Russia, he said? I've never denied so well. I never dined so well or sumptuously as when I crossed the Soviet border. For whole decades, your rulers, your members of parliament, your spokesmen, your journalists, your writers, your leading thinkers managed to ignore the 15 million strong Gulag archipelago. Up to 30 books on the Gulag were published in Europe before mine, and hardly one of them was ever noticed. there's a borderline beyond which the natural cause of progressive principles of the dawn of a new era become nothing more than calculated conscious hypocrisy, for this makes life more comfortable to live. Here's the thing, Britain, the United States, by time of World War One, and especially Britain, we're already owned by what would be considered the Marxists, the communists, progressivists, the what Henry Ford called the international you-know-whos. They were already controlling these in the background, the shadow governments. All right. There was, however, one great exception over the last 100 years or so, and that was your struggle with Adolf Hitler, when Britain cast overboard the philosophy of pragmatism and utilitarianism, the philosophy of recognizing any group of gangsters, any puppet as head of a country so long as they control its territory. Britain assumed a moral stance against Hitler, and it was this that inspired her to come her to one of the most heroic acts of resistance in our history. And now, this is where I disagree with him. Hitler was trying to have peace with them, and Churchill was a puppet of the people who, later were shaking hands with Stalin. I mean, I really think the vast majority of people, including scholars, have just got Hitler wrong. I don't know. That's just my take on it, for certain reasons. Okay. Let's see here. You defended and successfully defended precisely that which you intended to defend. But for the people of USSR, the war was a tragic war. We were forced to defend our native land with all the strength we could muster and with infinitely greater losses. Kruganov's figures are indisputable, 44 million, and in so doing, to strengthen all the things that were most loathed, the power of our own executioners, our oppression, our destruction, and as we can see today, ultimately your destruction too. And when those millions of Soviet citizens dared to flee from their oppressors or even to initiate national liberation movements, then our freedom-loving Western allies, and not the least among them, you British, treacherously disarmed them, bound them, and handed them over to the communists to be killed. They were sent to labor camps in Urals. They were where they mined uranium for the atom bombs which were to be used against you yourselves. Well, it's because it's, the British people, they're doing what they're told by the people that own the shadow government. Britain had a shadow government by that point. A pro-communism shadow government, I might add. Let's see here. We're on page 135. Nor did you shrink from using the butts of your rifles on 70-year-olds, those very men who had been Britain's allies in the First World War and who were now being hastily handed over to be murdered. From the British Isles alone, 100,000 Soviet citizens were forcibly repatriated, while on the continent the number was more than 1 million. But the most remarkable thing of all was that your free, independent, incorruptible press, your famous Times, Guardian, the Statesman, etc., all willingly shared in the cover-up of the crime and would have kept silent to this very day, not Professor Julius Epstein from America so tactlessly started his investigation into the fascist techniques that democracies are capable of employing. The conspiracy of the British press was only too successful. Indeed, there must be many people in Britain today who have not the faintest idea about this crime committed at the end of the Second World War but it was committed, and it has left a deep, painful mark on the Russian memory. This is it. The press, I mean, of course they're not going to do anything. They're owned by the same people. They're owned by the communists. That's the bottom line. I mean, you got to get rid. That's what you got to get rid of. You got to get rid of the people who own the press and the people who own the shadow government. Okay, let's see here. But there was a price to pay. The noble philosophy of pragmatism proclaimed that once again you should close your eyes to a great many things, to the deportation of whole nations to Siberia, to Katyn, to Warsaw, the same country for whose sake the war had started. You should forget Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. You should hand over 6 more of your European sisters into slavery and allow a 7th to be cut into 2. At Nuremberg, you should sit amicably side by side with judges who were just as much murderers as those on trial, and never let this disturb your British sense of justice. Whenever a new tyranny came into existence, however far away in China, say, or Laos, Britain was always the first to recognize it, eagerly pushing aside all competitors for the honor. Okay. All right, page 141, 140. Okay. Okay. Your newspaper may be famous for their traditions, but they print a number of articles containing analysis and commentaries which are shamefully shallow and short-sighted. What can one say when your leading liberal paper company compares the contemporary development of the Russian spiritual regeneration with pigs trying to fly? This is not just contempt for the spiritual potential of my people. It's broader than that. It's a kind of fastidious contempt for any kind of spiritual regeneration, for anything that does not stem directly from economics, but which is based on moral criteria. What an inglorious end to 400 years of materialism. Wow. The decline of contemporary thought has been hastened by the misty phantom of socialism. Socialism has created the illusion of quenching people's thirst for justice. Socialism has lulled their conscience into thinking that the steamroller which is about to flatten them is a blessing in disguise, a salvation. And socialism, more than anything else, has caused public hypocrisy to thrive. It has enabled Europe to ignore the annihilation of 66 million people on its very borders. Great Britain, the kernel of the Western world, has experienced this sapping of its strength and will to an even greater degree, perhaps than any other country. For some 20 years, Britain's voice has not been heard in our planet. Its character has gone, its freshness faded, and Britain's position in the world today is of less significance than that of Romania or even Uganda. British common sense, so lucid, so universally acknowledged, seems to have failed her now. Contemporary society in Britain is living on self-deception and illusions, both in the world of politics and in the world of ideas. People build rickety structures to convince themselves that there is no danger and that there is irrevocable advance is nothing more than the establishment of a stable world. And the people who control the sentiments of society. This is an argument I've gotten with some of my friends about the nature of the scribes and Pharisees in Jesus' day. There's this common sentiment in the Christian world that Jesus was he only really got angry at the religious leaders of his day, but the scribes and Pharisees were not merely religious leaders. They were those who set the tone of culture. They were the ones they were like the ADL. of, the first century. They were the ones that shamed people for not, following their directives and allowing them, to have control. And this is the same thing that happens today. Who's the manufacturer of culture and sentiment? Why, for instance, has been common for British people, and I'm speaking this because my mom is British, okay, and I know what she says and does and so forth, and there has been in her upbringing common to despise certain people, Western Europeans and the Irish and so forth. Is a lot of it is, it's not them. It's not a grassroots despisal. It's something that's been sewn into the psyche of the people from those who write the narrative and control the culture. The people who manufacture movements. That's where these sentiments come from. And even in America, growing up, growing up, there was a sort of a disdain for Europeans. Looked down upon them. Why? Because they actually still represent sovereign nations. There was still strong cultures back then, and America was the destroyer of culture. That's been the American philosophy since the founding FTARDs. That was, I'm sorry to say it that way. And I won't, there's a certain, like I would include Patrick Henry. And even Jefferson, there's an incredibly good quote I've come across from Jefferson recently. It's in a book that's out in my car right now. So I think maybe if I can find it real quick, let me see. I don't know. Okay, I found the book, but I might not be able to find a quote. But wow, it blew me away. I was like, I'll just, if I can't find it right away, I'll just continue with this. I'm almost done this other book review here, and there was this quote from Jefferson. It was just phenomenal. And let's see here. I probably won't be able to find it, but you'll be hearing it from me sooner or later because I'm going to be reviewing this book. This is Truth is a Lonely Warrior by James Perloff. It's another excellent book. Okay, so here we go. We're going to finish this off. Okay. Of course, it is not just a question of Britain. It's not just a question of the West. It concerns all of us in the East as well as the West. We are all, each in his own way, bound together by a common fate, by the same bands of iron, and all of us are standing on the brink of a great historical cataclysm, a flood that swallows up civilization and changes whole epochs. The present world situation is complicated still more by the fact that several hours have struck simultaneously on the clock of history. We almost face up to a crisis, not just a social crisis, not just a political crisis, not just a military crisis. Face up to it, but also stand firm in this great upheaval, an upheaval similar to that which marked the transition from the Middle Ages to the Renaissance. Just as mankind once became aware of the intolerable and mistaken deviation of the late Middle Ages and recoiled in horror from it, so too must we take account of the disastrous deviation of the late Enlightenment. We have become hopelessly enmeshed in our own slavish worship of all that is pleasant, all that is comfortable, all that is material. We worship things, we worship products. Will we ever succeed in shaking off this burden, in giving free rein to the spirit that was breathed into us at birth, that spirit which distinguishes us from the animal world? Great stuff, huh? And this is it. This is really interesting. I see this happening now. How many people are saying, well, let's just go along let's not investigate. Let's just assume, for comfort's sake, that the world, the global leaders are not up to something nefarious with these events that come down upon us, this random events. And a lot of it's because, hey, look, we're still. I mean, we wouldn't want to give up our creature comforts for something, like. So there we go, folks. There's where we're living. Here's where we are. Solzhenitsyn hit the nail on the head. I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. People are waking up. People. Here's the thing. I want to be optimistic. I have to be realistic. At the same time, there's a certain amount of realism that you might. I mean, things have gone bad, in the past. Things have gone bad, and denial is not necessarily the secret to, I mean, it might be a secret sort of getting through it, but that's still not, I mean, you really need to confront head on. I mean, that's why I got the sign out in front of my house, fake pandemic, real tyranny. I'm going to make another sign soon that says, end the war on freedom. I don't know, I was going to use the word arrest, but arrest doesn't, George Soros is not going to arrest himself, and he owns the system that can arrest him. So arrest is not the proper, it's not, it's just, at that point I might as well, be one of these conservative commentators that's, believes in the system and just, yammering until, everybody is taken into captivity, I mean, it's like, there has to be some solutions that actually work. So, I mean, I guess you could use the word eliminate George Soros and Bill Gates. I got to try to use a word that's not gonna, it's not gonna incriminate me. I'm not gonna. I got to be careful not to use a word that sounds like, I'm asking people to kill George Soros and Bill Gates. The problem is that you can't. The legal system, they own the legal system. So I don't know how else do you go about getting, these bad guys out of the system, out of the way, when there's no legal recourse. How does this work? How does it work? That's why I have to indulge in theoretics, whereby there are known methods of termination that you can only speak of theoretically. Would we rather just sit here and watch 5 billion people starve to death? Weigh that one out, okay? Weigh this out in your mind. Get your moral scales going. What would be morally correct? To allow people who are going to not just allow them to kill. Do we wait until, what point do maybe you should wait until maybe the first 500 million people are died, and then say, well, okay, now it's justified to take them out. And I'm just speaking theoretically now, people. That we're talking theoretics now. Remember, this is all theoretical. I can't stress that enough. So, do you wait till they kill, 500 million people and then say, okay, well now, it's justified to hire a hitman or, a bounty hunter or whatever. You wait till you wait till 1.5 million people, 5 billion people are starved. I don't know. There's only 300 million people in 320 million people in the United States. So they could take out the entire United States before you could say, well, maybe we should do something about it. I don't know. Is there anybody out there that works for the government that has a solution? I mean, look at the last president we have that thought that he would stand up to these guys. Got his head blown out on television. He got his brains blown out on television. Donald Trump knows that would happen to him. Look at how popular Ron Paul was. I mean, Ron Paul, if it was up to the populace, Ron Paul would have been president. 4 years ago, whatever it was, 5 years ago. Or no, that was way back. I think that was even further, right? That was Ron Paul was in when he was when Obama was still in, I guess. Yeah, that's right. But anyway, you get my point. I mean, look, it was so obvious that the whole majority population wanted to Ron Paul, and they wouldn't even let him run. You know what I mean? It's like the machine had just silenced him. So I don't know. Is anybody out there who works for the government who says, no, you can't hire an assassin, but we could do this. There's some other alternative that would. I mean, is anybody out there that knows how this stuff works? I mean, I don't. If it's illegal to hire an assassin, I don't know what else to do. Is there anybody out there? Anybody who works for the government? Attention, all government employees. Anybody knows law? Everybody knows. What do? You got a tyranny. Are you allowed? Here's the thing. We were taught in school. Okay, we were taught in school that the founding fathers were, almost morally obligated to kill the tyrants. And now, if somebody suggests theoretically that you start a crowd-funded blockchain website that's got to put bids on, takedowns, somehow that's morally inconceivable. I mean, didn't you go to the same schools I went to? Didn't you grow up in the United States and they taught you, over and over again, wow, these wonderful founding fathers, they were willing to kill the tyrants. Well, in order to kill a tyrant, you have to kill him. I thought killing was wrong. How can you teach us at school that, okay, these guys were so wonderful, and then at the same time tell us, you're not allowed to kill somebody who's a tyrant? I don't get it. To me, that's cognitive dissonance. It's the usual cognitive dissonance kind of thing. And remember, I'm just speaking theoretically. I'm not asking anybody to kill anybody. I'm not planning on killing anybody. So this is theoretics. I mean, look, talk about this. Okay, let's say you're a poli-sci guy, and you want to kick around ideas. Were the founding fathers correct in killing tyrants, or was killing morally incorrect? Now, and it depends. Okay, so let's say you say no, they were wrong. They shouldn't have killed tyrants. What do you do with that? What does that mean? Now that we or do you say, well, the founding fathers were correct in killing tyrants? I mean, they have this reenactment every year. They go over there and they, celebrate Washington crossing in Delaware. What did they get? They went over there and killed people in Trenton. British. They killed British in Trenton. Isn't that murder? I mean, how come that's not considered murder? Who made them? Who made them the government? I didn't make them. I never said George Washington was the government. You know what I mean? He was a general in what kind of army? A made-up army. They just made it up out of the blue. He wasn't part of the British. He was supposed to be British. Why did he? How does he just come up with his own army like this? How do you justify that? What is that? Oh man. So I'm gonna tell you what. I'm gonna take the higher moral ground. I'm gonna say, gee whiz, gosh, I don't kill anybody. Rather see 7 billion people starve to death. That's my higher moral ground. Then I can pat myself on the back for being such a wonderful human being. Why don't I do that, huh? Why don't I join that crowd? I mean, that's my only choice, isn't it? Really, I mean, that's we've been sort of cowered into that position that okay, the moral high ground is to just let the tyrant have free reign. And so that's what we're saying here. Let's just be good people. Let the tyrants have free reign, and we, at least when the dust settles, we can pat ourselves on the back, for being so righteous. I don't know. I mean, I seriously don't know what I certainly don't know. I mean, there's passages in the Bible where it's clearly stated that if you're going into captivity, that's all there is to it. You have no choice. If you're going to get put to death, that's all there is to it. You have no choice. And there's certainly a lot of situations where you just don't have any choice. I mean, I don't really think I don't really think that this theoretical idea I have about a crowdfunded blockchain thing, I don't think that's really a choice. It's just a theory. It's a theory, And so if it's not really a choice, then it's the right now. I mean, it's the only thing I could see that would actually work theoretically speaking. I mean, I guess the other thing that would work is if people could, let's do it. Let's do what George Washington and start our own army. Our own. I mean that would work. And we can just overthrow the government. I mean, that's what George Washington did, right? I mean, he's the guy he's supposed to bow down and kiss his boots. We could do that. I mean, that would work. It's a popular. Would be you'd have to have enough people to make it popularly justifiable. If you have popular consent, it becomes morally justified. But I was thinking that same thing about my theoretical website is crowdfunded. It would be popular. It would be popular consent. Does popular consent equal moral justification? I don't know. I thought that's how it worked. That's how my understanding. I mean, if somebody is a good political scientist that can explain that to me, how that's not the way it works, I would love to hear it. So I'm gonna keep reviewing great books. We'll end this one now. It's been about an hour. I'll talk to you guys next time. Take care.